everybody. Welcome back, my beautiful sisters. I am here, Julie Steelman, with you in the spirit of the prosperous feminine. And there's a fear that I know almost every woman has and has whispered to herself. And that's, what if I outlive my money, right? And so what we're going to talk about today is the number one money fear that happens after 50 and what you can do to flip it. And it's this kind of thought that actually keeps us up at night. We even laugh it off sometimes. Well, I guess I'll just work until I'm 90. Ha ha. I don't know about you, but I don't want to put that affirmation out into the universe. The truth is, I don't have to work anymore. But the truth is, I don't want other women to have to work for the rest of their lives either. Right. And underneath this joke is actually a gnawing fear of actually running out of money or being dependent and not feeling safe, right? Is this landing for you? And, I used to carry all that fear as well. I would second guess myself to the point of I would make myself sick before every one of my sales calls. And I thought, what if they don't see my value? What if I blow it? Right. And then I get back to the office and I get yelled at by my manager. Right. And so one afternoon, I walked out of yet another client call in a meeting into the beautiful, gorgeous LA sunshine. And the palm trees were swaying in the breeze. And out of nowhere came this thought of, if they knew what I knew, we'd be doing business together. If they knew what I knew, they would believe me. They would trust me. They would see my value and my worth. And it was that moment when I really realized that I had something valuable to say. It was my turning point. And that was when my inner sense of worthiness flipped on, it switched on, right? And I realized that my wisdom was valuable, that my experience had weight. And from that moment on, my income actually skyrocketed because what shifted in me was self-trust and self-confidence. And I started walking into meetings, having a different conversation with them. Instead of from the place of proving that leaves this energy of desperation in it, I started coming from a place of, here's how I see your problem, and here's what I see we could do with it, and here's how we could streamline the result, right? And all of a sudden that shifted how people perceived me. And to this day, I'm still friends with a lot of those clients. And from there, I realized that I needed to create cash flow for life. And I want you to be thinking that way, right? Because no one could ever again tell me what I could or couldn't do. And that's part of what I talk about is so importantly as sovereignty, as liberation, feminine financial liberation, feminine financial freedom. We need liberation before we can get to the freedom. So would you be willing to do that? Let's do that. Okay. So the truth here is that, what I want you to know is I can't talk you out of your money story, and I cannot talk you into your worthiness ever. Right? But I can show you how to lead financially, prosperously, and abundantly from within. And because the shift's got to start there. Remember, we need to get to financial liberation before we can get to financial freedom. Okay. And that liberation starts in here because your security isn't going to come from a savings account number. It comes from that inner shift that you can create, you can generate, you can receive, and you can lead with making and manifesting money on your terms. See, that's the difference. That's when we come into alignment. That's when we get really synced up with what it's going to take and our value. And so how we sell, enroll, or show up, or ask people for money, or to support our projects, or to get bought into our visions and our missions come from within, right? And so how do we flip that fear, right? And how do we start thinking about a new way for you to think instead of being afraid of outliving your money? And so the first thing is, I'm going to give you 3 things you can do here. You got to name it out loud. You got to say, repeat after me, I'm afraid I'll outlive my money. Because when you bring it into the light, it stops running the show. When you stop having this ghost in the corner, right? It doesn't keep trying to spook you. The second thing is to shift the question. Don't just ask, do I have enough? Ask, how can I create more than enough? That's the question when I was in corporate and this light bulb moment came on. And I went, I need to generate cash flow for life because I wanted out of the system. I wanted to live on my own terms. I wanted to travel without being limited to vacation days. I know you want to travel. I know you. You've all been around me for a while and you see me living that authentic, sovereign, financially liberated life and traveling and photographing big cats. It's my medicine and I love doing it. I can't live without it. I can't imagine going back to being 36 and not knowing how I would get that done, right? And so you got to shift the question, how can I create more than enough? Because that's what shifts everything. And you begin to ask yourself a question that's affirmative towards the positive. So it's not about a mindset shift, it's about an inner frequency shift, right? It's about really up leveling the way you see yourself and about the way that you start to problem solve around that. Because when we're chasing money, or we feel desperate to make it because there's a looming bill coming, or the other shoe's going to drop, or we're going to get forced to move, and we get into the bag lady fear syndrome, right? It's very, very, very difficult to actually figure out how to create more than enough. And so if you need to come back to this, okay? The third thing is to actually really anchor in your worth. And before, borrow my mantra if you need to. I've been saying this for decades. And it's like, if my client knew what I knew, they'd buy. If my client knew what I knew about the transformation they can get, they'd say yes. If my client knew what I know about the changes, the shifts, the outcomes, the results, the up levels that are sitting, waiting for them to say yes, they would most likely jump in. If my clients knew what I knew, we'd be business partners. If my clients knew what I knew, they would be so interested in what I'm offering. So, how can you be a better expresser of what you know? Or if you want to make this mantra your own, right? Something that calls you back to your value when you forget. It's a stake I have in the ground for myself that if they knew, if you knew what I knew, we'd be working together. If you knew what I knew, you'd be listening to all of my podcasts, right? And so here's the truth. Your liberation will never come from a bank balance. It comes from the moment you decide your wisdom is worth something. Then no one can ever take that away from you. No one. No political figurehead, no chaos that's happening on the planet, no economic downturns. Like, this is where we got to go, my loves. This is where we've got to be and where we've got to resonate from, is this place inside. When I talk about sovereignty, I'm talking about my inner strength to keep myself focused. And I don't buy into the greater scheme of what's happening in physical world reality. I buy into my truth. I had to recently make a change in a situation in a program that I was in. And like before I knew it, I was like, this is not it for me right now. And I stepped out boldly and bravely. It was a hard conversation to have. It was a hard thing to do. But I knew with every fiber of my being, with every one of my parts, with my lived wisdom and my lived experience, this was not where I needed to be anymore. And there's no making wrong. It's a fabulous, ridiculously amazing program. I got extraordinary value out of it. I'm headed in a different direction, and I needed to give myself the freedom, the liberation, and the permission to say, I know what I know, and I trust what I know, and that I'm being guided on a specific path that's so valuable and so worthy of me being a full body yes to commit to following this new path that I'm on. So the next time that fear creeps in for you, I want you to picture yourself in the sun, palm trees swaying in the breeze, the warm light on your third eye, and just say to yourself, if they knew what I knew, if they knew what I knew, and you finish the sentence, right? Because that's the moment we stop living in fear and start leading from within. And that's what makes you unforgettable and financially free. So next time, and come back and listen, please share this with your sisters. I'm on a mission to reach 1 million women and help them generate $1 billion in revenue? Will you be one of the people that shares this with another woman so that we can get the feminine financial awakening accelerated? I'm Julie Steelman. Until next time, stay fiercely feminine.